This is Norman Vincent Peale. What I have in mind to do is to give a little discussion on this subject, how to make positive thinking work for you. Now, the best I can do is to tell you how it has worked for me and in the experience of a good many people whom I have met across the years. How positive thinking will work out in your own experience, of course, will be determined by your own personality, your own attitudes, and your own faith. But first of all, I think we've got to determine what is positive thinking. There are many definitions. I like to go at it by describing a positive thinker. And I would say that a positive thinker is an individual who sees every difficulty and who sees them straight, nor is he abashed or discouraged by them, because he knows that by the exercise of his own inherent strengths, he can meet any situation and overcome any problem. So that a positive thinker is a person who has not an egotistical attitude, but a substantial attitude of confidence. He also is a person who realizes the distinction between negative thinking and positive thinking. A negative thinker does a very dangerous thing. He constantly sends out into the world about him negative thoughts, and he activates the world negatively. There is a law known as the law of attraction. Like attracts like. Birds of a feather flock together, and thoughts of a kind have a natural affinity. So that the negative thinker, constantly sending out negative thoughts, makes everything around him negative in nature. And in the very nature of the case, he draws back to himself negative results. It's like a man I met on a plane one day. I didn't know him at all, but apparently he knew me because we hadn't gone very far on our journey from New York to Chicago before he said to me, "Why does everything go wrong with me?" Well, now, how in the world did I know? I'd never seen the man before. So I said, I'll tell you what, suppose you talk for about 15 minutes about yourself, and maybe we can come up with some kind of a suggestion. But he didn't talk for 15 minutes, he talked for about 45, and it was one of the most negative dissertations I ever heard. Finally, he put his hand down in his fist with a resounding blow, and he said, "I know why everything goes wrong with me. It's because I am wrong myself." And I said to him, "Well, brother, you certainly have had an insight, because it is a fact that if we are wrong in our thought pattern, we're going to make everything wrong. So therefore, if a person is negative, he attracts every negative impulse that there is about. And believe me, there are plenty of them about." Now, the positive thinker, on the other hand, he sends out positive thoughts, and he activates the world around him positively. He begins to draw back to himself not negative results, but positive results. So while I may be perhaps oversimplifying it a bit, it is still a fact that as a person thinks negatively, so will he reap negatively, and as he thinks positively, so will he reap positively. One thing that I have noticed in the lives of people is that those who affirm that they're going to have positive results seem to attract them. Take, for example, an old friend of mine by the name of Mary Crow. Mary was the daughter of a miner in the coal mines down in the southern part of the state of Ohio. It was a very poor family. No child of the family had ever gone to high school. And Mary was just then in the last grade before high school. Her job was to wash her father's overalls. And of course they were pretty dirty. And they didn't have modern washing machines in those days. You had to do it mostly by hand. And she was sloshing her father's overalls around one night when all of a sudden a picture dawned in her mind. It was a college commencement on a beautiful college campus, and she was walking up to the platform to receive a diploma graduating her from that college, and she was receiving it from the hand of the college president. That was an image formed in her mind. Now, nobody in her family had ever even dreamed of going to college before, but now she had an image. She had a goal. She knew that she was going to go to college and graduate. She constantly affirmed it every day. Then what happened? She began to be a very good student, an extra good student. And when finally came the night that she graduated from high school, the parish priest asked her to come to his office in the church. And he took out of a drawer an envelope, which he said he'd been keeping for several years until the right person came along. It was a 4-year scholarship to a college. Now, it only paid for the tuition and the books. She would have to earn her way through from the standpoint of a place to live and food to eat and for her clothes. And that she did by serving as a maid, as a babysitter, as a waitress. Everything she could do, she did because she had this image urging her on that she was going to become a college graduate. And she did graduate with honors. Then she had another image. She was going to be an insurance producer. She was going to sell life insurance. This was an image in her mind as clear as a light. So she went downtown in Columbus to the office of a life insurance company, and she told the manager there she wanted to be an agent. He said, "There isn't a chance in the world of you ever being a life insurance agent. You haven't been trained for it. You have no aptitude for it, and this was the clincher. You are a woman, so you are out." But did this faze or deter her? Not at all. Every day when this agent or manager came to his office, he found Mary sitting there patiently waiting, and she said to him, "I'm going to sit here every day until finally you make me an agent." Finally, in sheer desperation one day, he gave her a rate book and he said, "I'll give you no desk, I'll give you no drawing account. There's the rate book. If you want to go out and starve, go ahead with my blessing." But she didn't starve. And there came a day, 25 years later, when this same manager presided at a big dinner in Columbus, given to Mary Crow, the largest producer in the company for that year, and she's been the largest producer for a number of years thereafter. I understand that the total amount of life insurance she sold equaled, if not surpassed, that of any male agent in the history of that agency. Now, if you ask Mary Crow how she came up from being the daughter of a poor miner to one of the greatest life insurance producers in her area, she will tell you that she constantly affirmed that she was going to reach her goal. And she had a goal in mind, not a fuzzy goal, a sharp, clearly defined goal, and the image was held in her conscious mind until finally it sank by a process of intellectual osmosis into her unconscious mind. And when it got into her unconscious, she had it because it had her. So I would say that one of the most important things about having positive thinking work for you is to have a goal, hold it as an image, and affirm it every day of your life, and then, of course, give it all you've got. Then another thing I've discovered about positive thinkers who make positive thinking work for them is that they have a very good opinion of themselves. They are not egotistical, but they do not depreciate their abilities. They believe that they've got something in their natures that can be stepped up. I remember when I was a very young, and I was a pretty shy, backward kind of a boy, that I met a man who said to me one day, and I never did forget it, nor did I ever forget him. He said to me, "Norman, never build a case against yourself." You see, up to that time, I'd been saying to myself, I don't amount to anything, I haven't got any brains, I haven't got any great ability, and I never can get anywhere. And I found after a while that people were agreeing with me. And it is true that people will accept you at your own self-appraisal. I was constantly building a case against myself, and as a result, I wasn't doing very well. But when I decided that Almighty God had given me a normal brain and a normal personality and a normal opportunity, that I was going to go out and make the most of it. And now one of the wisest men who ever lived in this country was Thomas A. Edison. And he said something once that is really pertinent. And I've always remembered this, and I hope you will too. He said, "If we were to do all the things we are capable of doing, we would literally astound ourselves." So the question is, have you ever astounded yourself? Have I ever astounded myself? Well, if we do all the things we're capable of doing, we will astound ourselves. Now, I believe also that it's important to have a positive attitude. Attitude is very vital. In fact, I once met a man, a prominent educator, who said to me something that really startled me. He said, "Attitudes are more important than facts." Well, at first that jarred me. What could be more important than a fact? There is a fact. There's no escape from it. There's a fact. But he illustrated it. He said, here's a fact, and it's a tough one. So one man views the fact, and he says, well, that's a fact. And that is a very tough fact. In fact, it's so tough that I don't think I can handle it. I don't believe that I can overcome it. My, this is an awful fact. So you see, what happens is his attitude toward the fact defeats him. Now along comes another man. He looks at the same fact, and he said, sure, it's a tough fact. So what? I'm tough. I'm tougher than it is. I am greater than anything that could ever happen to me. So he says, all you need to do is exercise what brains you have, and I've got enough brains to handle this fact. So he proceeds to handle it. So there's the same fact faced by two different men, But the important thing wasn't the fact. The important thing was the attitude toward the fact. Really, it isn't all that important what happens to you. The important thing is what you think about what happens to you. Not long ago, I had the chance to have a good visit with a man whom I've admired tremendously for a great many years. This man, I think, is one of the few great, even supreme athletes that have ever been produced in the United States. His name is Jesse Owens. I said to him, Mr. Owens, I'd like to ask you a personal question, if you don't mind. How did you become the great athlete that you are, world famous, one of the few greatest in the history of our country? Well, he said, I tell you, for purposes of argument, let us agree that maybe I have accomplished something. And if I have, here's the way it came about. He said, I was born into a poor family in Cleveland. My family, he said, was poor materially, but it was rich spiritually, which, if you ask me, is a terrific combination. He said, I was not very strong as a boy, rather spindly and skinny and so forth, not very prepossessing from the standpoint of being an athlete. But one day in school, they had an assembly, and the speaker on that occasion was Charlie Paddock, who at that time was hailed by newspaper athletic writers as the fastest human being alive. I myself remember seeing Charlie Paddock run one time, and he was like greased lightning. Well, Charlie Paddock came out before this great audience of kids, and he looked them all over, and he said, do you know who you are? And then he proceeded to answer his own question. He said, I'll tell you who you are. You are Americans, and you are children of God, and you can do and be whatever you want to be if you want it badly enough, to work for it and to have the attitude that will lead you to success in that field. Well, Jesse Owens said, the minute he said that, I knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the next Charlie Paddock. I wanted to be the fastest human being alive. And I could hardly wait for Paddock to finish speaking. I rushed up and grabbed him by the hand, and I could feel a magnetism surge from him into me. And I ran into the coach, and I said, Coach, I've got a dream. I've got a dream. I want to be the fastest human being alive. And the coach said, well, now, Jesse, that's great to have a dream because you'll never go any further than you dream. But he said, in order to attain your dreams, you've got to build a ladder to your dreams. And then Jesse Owens said that the coach gave him a ladder of 4 rungs. The first rung of the ladder is determination. You'll never get anywhere unless you determine that you're going to get somewhere. The second rung of the ladder was dedication. That is, you've got to give it all you've got. Give everything to it. The third rung of the ladder, discipline. That is to say, you have to take charge of yourself and become master of yourself. But the fourth rung of the ladder, said the coach, was attitude. And while the first 3 rungs are of vast importance, vital importance, attitude was the most important. And the coach said, what you've got to do is to get an attitude towards yourself, an attitude toward what you want to be, an attitude towards your future, an attitude towards your dreams, and an attitude of belief, positive belief, that these goals are not unattainable. Well, what happened? Came a day in Berlin when Jesse Owens ran off with most of the honors. Gold medals were his. He ran the 100 meter faster than any human being had ever run it, and similarly with the 220 meter. And his broad jump record lasted, I understood, for some 22 years. Now, here was a little boy out of a poor family with unpropitious circumstances. You wouldn't think, would you, that he could ever mount anything or ever get anywhere. But what happened to him? Why, his mind had an awakening. He had a really spiritual experience. He got to believing in himself and in his own future. And so he had a future. It's all what happens in your mind, in your attitudes, that determines what goes in this life. If you're a salesman, for example, this is so vitally important to you, I would think. I'm a salesman in a way. What is a salesman? He's a person who tries by the art of persuasion to impel a person to walk a road of agreement with him. Well, one night I was speaking to some 3,000 salesmen in Cleveland, Ohio. I well remember it was one of the coldest nights of the winter. And on this particular night, a high wind was blowing. Snow was drifting across Euclid Avenue when I went down to the theater where the meeting was to be held. We stopped the car at a red light, and I could see across the street a gasoline station over which was a huge banner. It was flapping in this high wind. It had big lettering on it, and it was advertising some kind of lubricating oil. And here's what it said on the banner: a clean engine always delivers power. Well, you know, that struck me. And I thought to myself, I'm going down here to talk to 3,000 salesmen about the fact that you can utilize the mind to develop power by which you live a successful life. You might say I took that thing on the banner as my text. And I went down and I spoke to them and I said, you've got to get out of your mind all negative thoughts. You've got to have a healthy mind. You mustn't have any hate. You mustn't have any resentment. You've got to get rid of fear. You've got to get rid of anxiety. You've got to get rid of inferiority. You've got to have a clean mind, because only that kind of a mind will deliver the power that will make you a producer. And along that line I talked. Well, after I'd finished my speech, I went backstage, and in barged a young fellow in his 30s, I guess he was, great big fella, and he threw his arms around me and he says, boy, do I like you. I said, well, that's great, but why so vociferous? He said, you know, I was sitting out there in that audience, utterly discouraged. Nobody could be lower than I was an hour ago. Now, he said, you talked about a person who was a failure. Well, you were talking straight to me. I have been a failure as a person. I've been a failure as a husband. I've been a failure as a father. I've been a failure as a salesman. On the totem pole, I have been way down near the bottom. But while you were talking about a clean engine always delivers power, or a clean mind always delivers power, I saw that that was my trouble, because my mind has been a mass of rottenness. That is, I've been full of fear, I've been full of hate, and every other kind of a thing, and self-doubt, and inadequacy, and inferiority. But while I was sitting out there in that audience, I decided I was going to let it all go. And I asked the good Lord to help me to have a clean mind. And all of a sudden, I felt a surge of power in my mind, and I know, without any doubt, from this minute on, I've got a picture of myself, he said, as going out there tomorrow, an altogether different man, and I'm going to succeed. Man, did he succeed. By the end of that year, he was the second man in his whole organization in point of sales, and for the last few years, he's been the undisputed top man. Now that is what positive thinking did for him, and it's what positive thinking has done for a great many other people. And I think that positive thinking can do that for you. If you buy it, really go for it and practice it and have what it takes to stick with it. Positive thinking won't work the first day necessarily, nor even the second day, nor even the third day, nor even the first month. But if you get yourself in a positive groove so that gradually you eliminate the negatives which have been habitual for so long, one of those days you'll have a breakthrough. And then life will be different and more wonderful and more successful than it has ever been before. I believe in positive thinking. I've been writing about it and talking about it for years, and I've seen it demonstrated in the lives of countless thousands of people. So I believe that if you've been having any trouble and not succeeding as well as you should, that you might be very well advised to become a practitioner of positive thinking, because it stands to reason, it only makes sense that what it's done for others, it can very well do for you. Henry Thoreau was one of the wisest men America ever produced. And he said, "Men are born to succeed, not to fail." And that is for sure. Once I was at a circus place and I saw a young man with a tattoo mark on his chest. I've often wondered why people would put tattoo marks on themselves anyway, but this one was the worst I ever saw. For tattooed into that young fella's chest were these words, "Born to lose." Now, he had tattooed them not only into his flesh, but he had tattooed them into his mind. For in conversation with him, I found that he took the attitude that he never could do anything with himself, would never get ahead, never make a success. And I got to thinking, wouldn't it be a good idea to tattoo, not in your flesh, but in your mind, these electrifying words, "Born to succeed"? Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Self-trust is the first secret of success." So if you learn to believe in yourself and to trust yourself and to hold images of success and to continue constantly to affirm success, then success is bound to come to you. When I was in about the 5th grade in school, we had a professor there, a teacher named George Reeves. He was a huge man, weighed about 250 pounds, stood 6 feet 4. And believe me, he exercised discipline in his school. He'd do a strange thing once in a while. He would go to the blackboard and write on the blackboard the word can't, C-A-N''T. And then he would turn to the class and he would say, "What shall I do with the word can't?" And we knew what he wanted, so we chanted back, "Knock the T off the can't." Then with a sweeping gesture, he would erase the apostrophe and the T and leave the word can standing out there clearly defined before us. Then he would point a finger at us and he would say, "Let that be a lesson to you. You can if you think you can." used to do that every now and then. Well, it made a terrific impression on every student that ever studied under George Reeves. He made us believe in ourselves. He made us believe that we had qualities and abilities that we didn't know we had. He took the inferiority feelings out of us. He gave us faith. Faith in God, faith in other people, faith in our jobs, faith in ourselves. He taught us never to build a case against ourselves. That, I think, is basic in positive thinking and in making it work for you, to believe that whatever you can dream of, you can achieve. So, God bless you, and best wishes.